Today, the Feast of the Transfiguration. That's why we have white instead of green. That's why we had the reading from Luke rather than the other reading that was appointed for the day. There are certain feasts that take precedence over any Sunday readings, and this is one of them. It happens to fall on a Sunday this year. Well, the Transfiguration, you've heard this story before, haven't you? Jesus, Peter, James, John, going up the mountain. It has some rich and great and familiar theology. You've heard it so many times, maybe it's a little boring. I'm sure you've heard so many things explained to you from this text. We've picked this story over for ages, and there's lots of interesting facts. Here's one. They go up on a mountain. Now, what happens on a mountain in Scripture? Old Testament, New Testament. You go up on the mountain, you're going to see God. That's where you meet God, on the mountain, in Scripture. Moses went up on the mountain, didn't he? To get the commandments, yeah? Heard God, spoke to God, came down, his face was shining white, just like today with Jesus. All familiar things. Symbolically also, this is the height of Jesus' ministry. This is the height of his earthly ministry. When he goes down the hill, again, goes down the mountain, he'll go to Jerusalem, where they will scourge him and crucify him and kill him, and he will be risen from the dead. So this is sort of the height of the earthly ministry. Also, they're up on that mountain isolated. It's just them. All those are important about the mountain. Now, he takes with him Peter, James, and John. His closest, most outspoken leaders, and they're the ones who are going to have to carry on this ministry. Right? James, and John, and Peter. They are also inept, confused, unsteady, and undependable. And so they're going to need this experience. They're going to need this encouragement, this assurance, this instruction, if they're going to carry on after Jesus' death. I suspect that's why they were there. Now, they are not the social elite. They're literally fishermen. Right? They are not religious elite. There's not a rabbi in the bunch. Maybe they're not deplorables, but they're definitely not cosmopolitans. That was a little political joke. I don't know. Been following politics, but that was a little joke. Anyway, they are all that he has, and he is fine with that, but they need this experience. Otherwise, if they didn't need it, then Jesus would have just gone up by himself, right? There's some reason why he brought them with. Okay, then Jesus is transfigured. His appearance is literally changed, dazzling, hard to look at, purified, if you will. Just like Moses in Genesis. Same event, right? And then Moses and Elijah show up, right? Two great prophets of old show up. Not as ghosts, but as literal people, right? And Jesus is in their company and of their stature, and he is one of them. And it is important that they recognize that Jesus is one of them, because Moses and Elijah, they're a big deal. Like the great prophets. Now Jesus is among them. And now his identity, his authority, his claims, his promises are authenticated. And, as an aside, for the first century Palestinian Jew, the rabbis and the kings are shown up. Because God doesn't appear to the rabbis or to the kings. God appears to Jesus. So it's like, Okay. Then the cloud. The cloud comes. Now what's the cloud about? Mystery, confusion, fear. That's what happens when a cloud comes in Scripture. Think of the densest fog that you've ever been in. And then the voice. This is my son. Listen to him. God repeats what God had said at Jesus' own baptism. So you know that it's God and you know that it's true. And so now the story ends and it's off to Jerusalem. And if you love exegesis, that's looking at Scripture deeply, if you love history and theology and black and white and facts and figures, there you go. God bless, that's your sermon for today. But if you want something to take away for the week, many do. Many say, don't give me all the facts, just give me something to take away for the week. If you engage the world more with feelings than with facts, if you find God more in relationship than rote memorization, then let me say a little more about that cloud. Because I think for us, in our time, we're not so interested in Elijah and Moses or even Peter and James and John. I mean, that's all great and everything, right? But I think we're interested in how we're going to get through today. How we're going to get through this week. With all the noise and the shouting and the confusion and the killing and the suffering and the hunger and disease and big disasters like tornadoes and floods and little disasters like bounced checks and bruised cheeks. Up there with Jesus on a perfectly clear day, we assume, out of nowhere, an all-enveloping, all-encompassing cloud moved in. And all of a sudden, they couldn't just not see Jesus. They couldn't just not see their buddies next to them. They couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. And they are confronted with ghosts of their past, and they hear voices. God's voice, it says. But I imagine they are hearing other voices in that deep, dark place as well. Voices of fear and regret and shame and guilt. And by God, isn't that how it feels for us some of the time? When I am in that dark cloud, feeling alone and confused, the voices I hear most clearly are speaking to me of my own past and shame and guilt and fear and regret. Do you hear these voices in your own lives? But God's voice did cut through it all with a single message. And it was not fancy theology or flowery poetry, but a simple offer of a way through, of a way out of the cloud. What did God say? Listen to him. And who is him? Jesus. Listen to him. Now notice what they did not hear that day. They did not hear, listen to your gut. Although there are many times when that is a perfectly good thing to do. Most of the time maybe. But that's not what they heard that day. They did not hear, listen to your priest. Because why? We ain't Jesus. We ain't Jesus. We are you. We are lost and frightened half the time as well. They did not hear, listen to your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or auntie or uncle or anybody else on radio or on TV or on the internet or blog writers or bricklayers or book signers or elected officials or school teachers or street preachers. Nothing wrong with any of those, but that's not what they heard. They heard this. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. So if you want to take something away for the week, here you go. Christians, you are lost, tired, alone, blind, and terrified. Either you are right now, or you have been in the past, or you will be in the future. I can guarantee it. Because that is the truth of any life, and especially the Christian life. Christians are called to let go of the comfortable and the easy and to take up the difficult and the dangerous and even the dreaded, which will make you feel confused, which will make you feel disoriented. And when you find yourself lost, tired, alone, blind, and terrified, God says in that moment to do what? Listen to him. Listen to Jesus. Now, so, what do you think Jesus would say? There are hundreds of quotes. This is only one quote of many. You may have your own favorite sayings of Jesus that guide you in the dark moments, but there's lots of them. I didn't have to look very far. Just a few verses earlier, or chapters earlier in Luke's gospel, it says this, quote, Jesus speaking, "Love your enemies. Do good and lend. Expect nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." End quote. The way out of the cloud, Christians, is the way of Jesus, which is, in the end, the way of love. Do something nice for someone. Serve someone else. Take care of someone when you feel like nobody gives a hoot about you. Be generous to someone when you get all balled up about money. Help someone when you feel helpless. Trust someone when you feel betrayed. Love someone when you feel alone or unlovable. Don't do it because I said so. I'm just a priest. Don't listen to me. Read it for yourself. Read and study and learn, and if you can, live the words of Jesus. They are the way out. They are the way through. When it all boils down and when it all falls apart, they really are the only way forward.